Welcome everybody to Perfectly Healthy episode. I'm so excited to welcome back Ariel Causey. She worked with us for a while back, and it's been a couple of years
Yeah.
that you went off to become more expert at everything you do. So we get to take advantage of that. So I'm going to have her share a little bit about how she got started. And as if you've been watching us, you know that we're a multifaceted integrative medical center, which means that we treat the common colds to cancer, and so our intention is to meet you where your needs are at. And so, as the nutritionist here, for those of you who don't know me, I really depend on the doctors, labs, and so forth, and direction and guiding them into their personal programming, whether it's lifestyle or the emotional work. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce Ariel. Welcome back, and just tell us a little bit about what inspired you to be a doctor.
Thank you, Liliana. It's a pleasure to be back. It's been several years, like you mentioned, about 6-7 years since I've been here. So what inspired me to go into medicine is I probably was an odd child. I had that goal in mind of I'm going to go into healthcare. I originally said I was going to go to school to become a pediatrician. And that changed over time. I had life experiences, and actually one of my first jobs ever, I worked for a chiropractor, acupuncturist, and massage therapist, and saw the different ways that you can heal the body. And I think that really helped to open my eyes to all of the potential possibilities that were available out there in order to help heal the body. So went to school, went pre-med, and then eventually actually went to school to become a nurse practitioner. So I'm a registered nurse and a nurse practitioner. And I specialize in, so my official degree is family nurse practitioner, anything from birth to death, technically. But my specialty is integrative and functional medicine, where I help to optimize the individual based on their needs and what their idea of health is today.
Okay, so just talked a little bit about myself in regards to, my passion has always become my purpose. I started out in track and field, and of course, that led me to be a health club owner and then be a teacher in fitness and health. And then, of course, as life will unfold itself, both of my parents had gotten cancer. So I kind of turned my attention over to how I could support them best. And that was through creating a foundation with nutrition. And like most of you out there, it's very confusing when you are starting to research, and there really wasn't that much information in regards of treating cancer. So I had to use a lot of intuition, had to look on a lot of different platforms in regards of how to put a protocol together. And that's what we do here. We're always looking at outside the box in regards of how we can treat you. So a lot of our stuff is, not as conventional as you say. We're going to be looking at, what bugs and viruses that you have. And so this is what I did with my parents. And of course, they became the cornerstone of my purpose as I continue on in this lifetime, is to support people in their healing process in any way possible. So Lyra's right. Oh, there we go. All right, great. And so, of course, working with Dr. Canilli with over 20 years, she kind of gives me a binder and says, okay, read this and let's teach it on Monday, right? So it's always been very challenging with all of the latest and the greatest of things that we need to keep ourselves abreast of. But of course, I teach a lot of courses, but mainly we're looking at lifestyle in general. So I'm going to go ahead and just switch over here. And so, Ariel, I'll just to talk to you a little. I would ask you to maybe talk a little bit about, our approach here in regards of, when a patient comes in, what are some of the things that we want to lay down as a foundation?
Yeah, so there's many different pieces to making a person well. I think that oftentimes there tends to be a focus mostly on the physicality of an individual, but there are many other factors. So when a patient first comes in, we're going to do a very comprehensive workup. So there's going to be a lot of testing involved. Some of that's blood tests, some of that's urine tests, some of that is actually frequency-based medicine testing. And so that gives us a clear understanding of kind of the foundation of where the patient's at when they first come into the center. There's many things that we can tell on those examinations that are beyond what like a normal, primary doctor would be looking at. Even sometimes just like a nutritionist outside of this realm where they don't have the opportunities and some of the tests that we have here. So very comprehensive testing. We're going to look at every single aspect, anywhere from genetic code, genetic SNP tests, to if you were coming in, say, for cancer treatment, which is a big focus that our clinic definitely has. Then we're going to do additional testing that's going to look at not just the genes of the cancer, but it's also going to look at maybe treatment options that would be best for that cancer, specifically for the individual, as well as what we can do supportive for that patient to make sure that they as a whole person are as well. So there's the workup, there's meeting with one of the providers like myself, and then you're going to meet with the rest of our staff like Liliana. She does some wonderful treatments with our patients. So I think she's too modest beyond nutrition. She also does a lot of focus on the wellness of an individual by helping them with emotional needs as well. So she is one of our EVOC specialists here, and that is such an integral part of helping our patients be fully well, is helping them with the emotional aspect. So knowing that emotions can dictate how our body reacts and responds can be so vital to making a person entirely well.
Because so many times, we come in with preconceived belief systems, and or if they've actually, done a lot of research and they're coming from a place of fear, a lot of these childhood programming, comes along with them. So we, our intention is to, we can only break down what we can observe. And so when we bring it through their attention, like some of these things, biofeedback of EVOCs, it's just so beautiful because the body doesn't lie. And I always say we treat the body as if it's a child. And I say, an immune system doesn't have critical thinking. So that's kind of like your child. So you'd have to have the mindset of it's based upon the emotional safety. So we really want our patients to feel safe here, that this is a place where they can be heard. Oftentimes, sometimes, Ariel, in these sessions, I may not even get to a lot of the, the actual treatment because they just need to be heard. Yeah. They just need a platform to be able to tell their story. And in that story, a lot of healing can take place because now they're able to look at the theater of the mind and, what they're projecting and how we can, be the writer, the director, and the actor, and, take another probability out of the field and then, exercise those options. So yes, the emotional part, I would say, is very, very important, just as well as all of the testing. Now, Ariel, once you do all the testing, because I know a lot of patients are super overwhelmed, because all of a sudden, they realize, oh my God, I got parasites, I've got mold, I've got heavy metals, I've got all of these things on top of everything else I have. Yeah. And of course, we always have to say, what compromised the immune system to even not, to be in the position, have a diagnosis. And a lot of times the immune system is so, how would I say, so disorganized because it's like trying to do all these things. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't think about the invading army when, I've got all of these uninvited guests that I need to get out of your house. So, so how do you deal with a patient, for example, that all of a sudden now, besides the diagnosis that you're giving them, now you're giving them 3 or 4 or 5 more things that they need to look at?
It can be very overwhelming. So I feel that is something that we try to mitigate as best as possible because all of these kind of play into each other. Like you mentioned, it's creating this disorganization within the immune system. So it's making it harder for it to do the jobs or the tasks it's supposed to do. So we tend to see that patients tend to get colds very often, or when they do get sick, they get really sick. And so those can be symptoms that this immune system is not doing everything it's supposed to be doing. So essentially speaking, you come in, you do the testing, we review it together, we kind of go through what our game plan is. So we usually want to get you set up so that your body is able to handle the treatments that we're going to do. So when you come in, it can be overwhelmed, like you said, with infections, most notably like fungus, parasites, heavy metals, Epstein-Barr virus, right? All of those things that all contribute to why the immune system is lowered and maybe why some of these conditions may have popped up. And it doesn't have to be cancer. It could be diabetes. It could be high blood pressure. They all come from this like root cause of these issues that are going on underneath the surface that other traditional tests have a really hard time capturing, right? You can even do a stool test and it may not be positive for these infections, but we still know that they're there and that they're still weighing on you. So we usually start off by kind of doing a once over little clean of the system, and then we go into some of the specific treatments. So that can be like a cleanse. It can be going on a specific diet plan that may be more beneficial, and prefacing things like really good lean protein, plenty of vegetables in the system, and then setting your body up to have really good lymphatic drainage and detox pathways. And then we start working on the other issues that may be bringing the system down. So if we did see things like heavy metals or parasites, we're going to work on those first, because that is taking over the immune function, like what your immune system is able to do for you. And if we don't address those things, then even if I threw the kitchen sink at the other problem, it may not get better. So we have this very tailored approach, systemic approach of we're going to do this step by step. So it's not as overwhelming, and there's many things we can do alongside other treatments, but we do have to get the core, the foundation right. Otherwise we can't address the root, the true problem you presented for.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe some of you have even experienced this is, you went on, internet, cleanse, or on Instagram, and all of a sudden you start doing this and then you start feeling really sick. It's like, this is not good for me. Well, it's not that. It's that your pathways aren't open. So it's really important for us to recognize, what are you capable of excreting and moving it out of the body so that you don't reabsorb it. So, I think that's what's really special about Dr. Keneally is she's looking at all facets in regards of how do we actually treat a patient, top to bottom, bottom to top, right? In so many
However you want to look at it, yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, it's always overwhelming when you have an unexpected something that's happening that's put on your plate. And I always call this the hero's journey when it is a cancer diagnosis, because it's not something that you didn't sign up for, and it's a shock and all of these things, but it's just like, okay, I want to be a hero to myself because I want to stay in my body. I want to be a hero to my family so that I can continue to, love and things of that nature. So it is, an overwhelming experience, but at the same time, what we're looking to do is create a foundation even in your own home with your family. I always say, have a talk to your family in regards to what does a healing home look like? And then, real transparency of, well, it might look a little different for your children, like Stack when they get home, or husband, don't talk to me for an hour before I get home, and then give me the list of things you want me to do. And then for you, so that all the needs can be met, because so often when there's someone that is compromised in the household, it's not just the person that's compromised, it's the whole family that's compromised. And so how do we support each other? So that's kind of one of my fortes, is just really creating a foundation for them to not look at this as a punishment, but an opportunity for catapulting them into a more, I call it spiritual growth, because a hero's journey is all about a spiritual growth rather than so much a human experience, but you definitely feel it on a human level.
Yeah.
Definitely feel it on a human level. Okay, so you want to talk just a little bit about the RGCC and some of the scans that we do?
Yeah, so some of the testing I was alluding to before was RGCC. RGCC is a specialized test that gets sent actually out of the country. It's been around for decades, and they do specialized testing. It was developed by an oncologist. And what it can do is it can take, say, a healthy person who's looking, say they have an extensive family history of certain types of cancer, and they just want to know that they're healthy, that there isn't anything lingering. Or we can take an individual who's been diagnosed with cancer, and we can leverage that test. So it can look for things like circulating tumor cells, which are abbreviated CTCs. And those can help to indicate one, like say the type of cancer if we didn't know a type, and this was just something for like a screening or prevention. Or we can use it to do more genetic testing on the cancer cells themselves. We can also determine like which chemotherapeutic would be most beneficial based on your cancer specifically. So it's very tailored to you and your specific type of cancer. I love it because I don't feel medicine does a good job of taking people and presenting with personalized treatment plans versus everyone fits into a box. So if you were to go and get traditional chemo, everyone fits in that box. Well, that's not really the case. Everyone's cancer is completely individualistic. It also tells us natural agents that can be used to help within 3 categories. So one would be cytotoxic, meaning it can kill cells specifically. So that natural agent can help to kill cancer cells. It can also work to help boost the immune system to help fight against it, which is some of your best fighters for cancer. And then the last area would be, it's called PK inhibitors. Basically, it helps block certain types of signals or growth factors that the cancer cell might be emitting. So it's very comprehensive test. The other option too with RGCC is if we did find some of those chronic infections you were talking about. So Lyme's, mold, another one could be Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus.
About HPV even, right?
HPV can actually be treated. So they have treatment types that can be given. So we would send that sample over. They can create a individualized plan for you with cell-directed therapies that can be given by RGCC labs. So that's fantastic. And then we also leverage and utilize all the other general screening tools. So CAT scans, MRIs, PET scans as necessary, ultrasound, biopsies, and then all the general lab work. But think of our lab work as on steroids, right? Like we do a very comprehensive overview of lab work. It is not your traditional, 2 vial lab tests that you get with your regular doctor. It's going to be all of the tests at the same time because, again, you as an individual, there are so many different aspects to what makes you well and meeting you where you're at that time.
And the more information, the more power and the ability
100%.
to choose, because not everybody wants to do chemotherapy. Not everybody wants. So again, it's like we really want to, like I said, beat the patients where they're capable. I mean, they might start out coming here because they don't want it. And then, we try all of the natural therapies, but then the doctor's advising maybe it's time to, change the GPS and go in this direction. It's not that what we've done didn't work. It's just this now we just need to add something else. And so, when you can honor what people want, it makes them feel a lot safer instead of, again, like the traditional mindset of pushing you by fearing you into a situation when you're not ready.
Exactly. And so I think the main point there is kind of getting to working with individuals, right? So making sure that we're in agreement. So I don't think there's a best practice in medicine outside of you and I should be on the same page in terms of the treatment that we're offering. We don't necessarily want to go against that because you're not going to be as compliant with it, right? And so it needs to be a partnership. You need to be involved in that. It needs to make sense to everybody who's involved. And so presenting you with the options. So, I highly encourage patients to come here, seek our opinions, but also hear opinions of others to make sure that we're all in alignment, that it makes the most sense for their treatment plan and for what's going on for their health situation at the time.
And I really encourage everyone to be their own advocate, right? We're just like anybody else with stressors and things like that, and things might slip by us. So I said, if we said we were going to deliver this to you on Tuesday, but it's Wednesday, don't feel shy to come up and say, hey, Ariel, I haven't gotten that test that you said you were going to send to me, because, we're here to support you in any way we can. And that's making you feel safe, and that having a team that, is all integrated with each other. And so I always say, don't hesitate to speak up, and no question is a silly question, or you're not being a lot of, I don't want to be, I don't want them to think that I'm not being compliant or that I'm, questioning their authority. And I said, no, we love that, because the more questions you have, the more roots you will get into why I'm doing what I'm doing, and then that makes your treatment so much more effective when you really are signed up for the why behind why I'm here.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so is it question time? All right. So there was a few questions that were sent in, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read these out, and we'll just see what comes up. So does everyone have heavy metals in their bodies, and where do they come from? So I'll let you start with that.
Yeah, so great question. I would say that we all have exposures that could increase the likelihood of having heavy metals. Some patients have a harder time dealing with heavy metals when they come in exposure with them, meaning, so what we were alluding to earlier is like detoxification pathways. So some patients have difficulty because they have trouble with methylation. So as an example, so that's cellular level, that's at the mitochondria. If we can't do certain tasks, then we can't release things we come in contact with. And so our body's pretty good about wanting to make sure that when we eliminate things, we eliminate them safely. And so if we can eliminate them safely, it's just going to hold on to them.
Yeah.
So that kind of build a storage facility, right? And so unfortunately, sometimes those storage facilities, they get crammed up and overfilled, and then they come to us, and we kind of tend to see that problem. So there can be heavy metals in exposures to most people, but it has to do with how your body's able to clear it. They can come from multiple different places. So as an example, like aluminum is a pretty common metal that we can tend to see in the body. And so we drink from aluminum cans, we eat out of aluminum cans, so food packaged in that. We cook on aluminum, so aluminum baking dishes, aluminum cookware, like aluminum in our deodorant. Like, so aluminum can be very prevalent. It can come from many different places. Mercury, another common one, right? And so not so much these days, but before, dentistry used to use a lot of mercury fillings. So that's a very common place. If you work in an industry where you deal with metals, then you're going to tend to have more of them in your body because it's overwhelming, right? Even if you had excellent detox pathways, the simple amount of them you're being exposed to, you may not be able to handle. So we'll tend to see problems associated with that. So that could be like mild changes on a complete blood count where your red blood cells maybe look a little bit beefier than they're supposed to, or you have trouble either holding on to iron in your blood or making iron
having
in your blood.
Deficiencies.
Exactly. So, and this can tell us that pathway is blocked up. Are there instances that you see as a nutritionist too?
Yeah. And then of course, we have a lot of people who are pescatarian. And so they have a tendency to be eating a lot of fish. And of course, everybody loves tuna, right? And of course, the larger fish like tuna and shark, they're going to live a long time. So they're going to collect more toxins than other fish. So I always say, don't eat the large fish. Yep. But then again, if you're going to be a pescatarian and you're not going to eat animal products, and I say, okay, well, let's just have, at least, maybe 3 days of the week, the fish, but then the other days of the week vegetarian if you don't want to eat meat, and then making sure that you're getting an adequate amount of protein. But yeah, so I'd say, it's pretty difficult to avoid heavy metals because if they're not in the soil or in the air or in the water. So as Ariel said, is that, if your pathways are open, because there are a lot of people, who don't have, like, they have, but it's not causing them a problem.
Right.
Let's just say, for example, because almost everybody we test has a little bit of something. Okay.
Everyone has something.
Right.
Yep.
But it's not like cutting off their circuitry in regards of the electrical current and then, basically sucking up all their minerals to try to, buffer a caustic nature. And so again, we kind of just examine, where maybe you are picking these up and what are we going to help you detox from them. All right. Simplest things like dulse and kelp and things of that nature, chlorella, things that you can actually consume to eat if they're very low or cytodetox or things like that. So we have, natural things that can help support as well as, chelation. But what I find interesting sometimes, Ariel, is like, let's just say they have a heavy metal test. And let's just say, lead showed up or aluminum showed up, but mercury didn't. Okay. Then they did all this chelation. All of a sudden now mercury shows up.
Yeah.
Right. And it's because the body is so smart. And it's like, I'm not going to release into the blood until I know you can get it out. Yep. So a lot of times when we start to detox, some, and all of a sudden these other ones show up and they're just really confused. And I say, well, body's protecting you from all of a sudden just start pulling and stuff. And then we have to have binders to make sure that, that you are able to eliminate them, especially if you have issues with methylation, which, a lot of us do. I have one, genetic mutation in terms of my MTHRF gene. So we have to be just a little bit careful on that. So I would say we're all exposed, but not all of us have an issue in terms of it's compromising our health at the moment. Okay.
Yeah.
Jim was asking live, what our approach is to prostate cancer.
Okay.
So the question was, what is our approach to prostate cancer? So prostate cancer, generally speaking, it's going to be very similar to how patients come in. They're going to do the testing like we're talking about. It's very comprehensive testing. It depends on where they're at with their prostate cancer, what they've tried before in the past, and what we're looking at right now in front of us. So it is a little bit different in terms of that and what you're willing to do. So some patients come to us, they have prostate cancer, they really don't want to do surgeries, they don't want to do chemo, they don't want to do hormone suppression therapies like Lupron, and so we would definitely lean in on things like RGCC. We would definitely lean on some of our tests to kind of see where we're at and what might need to be done. In general, we work hand in hand. So for the most part, we're an integrative clinic, right? Where we work with conventional doctors and ourselves using conventional treatments at times. So medications, like we're not opposed to the use of medications, but we do a combined effort, right? So it's not necessarily all one or all the other all the time. It's what is going to work best for you. So unfortunately, it's a really hard question to answer without a ton of information. What I would do is encourage you to, seek more information with our office, consider coming in for an assessment, because that's really going to be the best indicator of how we're going to address your prostate cancer. But there are a multitude of options out there that we can utilize and leverage for your benefit and for what fits your needs.
Yeah, it's so important that they have to believe in what they're doing, right?
100%. I mean, there's a big amount of that placebo effect, right? Where if you believe in what's going on, then there's more benefit to it. And we can see that in things like groupthink even, right? So the stronger we all think that the same thing is right, like
exactly.
that it happens, right? So what I would say is if you believe at the core too that your treatment is in alignment with you, then you're going to have a much better outcome. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you have any other questions that were okay? I'm going to go to this next question. It says, I was recently diagnosed with squamous cell carcinoma. The treatment seems to be cutting around the cancerous area and having the healthy tissue stitched up. The recommendations moving forward is to, let me just get this little picture out of the way here so I can see. Okay. Oops. Let me go forward.
Okay. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So I find this confusing as I know there are some healthy benefits to the sun. Second, I would like to know if there's anything I can do to keep my body healthy to prevent future occurrences. So squamous cell carcinoma, of course, is the skin. So I'll go ahead because sunshine is important. But so what would you say in that case?
It is, but there are some limitations to the health benefits of the sun. So most research is supportive that getting outside in direct sunlight is beneficial for you. For those who are more prone to it, we may recommend sun protective clothing, which kind of blocks out some of the more harmful rays of the sun after about 10 minutes or so. So unprotected sun exposure can be beneficial between 5 to 10 minutes, getting up to maybe 15. Beyond that, we start seeing some damage from the rays of the sun, right? And so after that point in time, we generally recommend wearing hats. We wear sun protective clothing, like thicker materials, ones that go down to the wrist, or pants, things of that nature. There's some information about chemical sunscreens and the harm that they can cause. So if we are going to use sunscreens, I generally recommend the mineral-based sunscreens, and just being knowledgeable about what brands you're using and the types that you're using. So I would say, yes, it sits kind of in a gray zone. You'll find both sides of the fence, so dermatologists and or oncologists who will be on both sides there. So it's not just only in integrative medicine that we believe the sun has health benefits. I think the newer generation of people who are looking at some of the newer studies that have come out about sun exposure would agree that there's a lot of benefit between that 10 to 15 minute mark.
And I think the 10 to 15 minute mark, just entertain the idea of sunrise. This is going to be the best time where you're going to get the UVs are going to be the lowest. And, it's when it's the most quietest. So I say to my patients, go have your coffee out there, go have your tea out there. And then right now it's, a time of weather where we can sit out there and not be freezing and stuff. But I find that that is the most effective. Even for the pineal in regards of let's get going, have that little cortisol hit and get the melatonin to stop. So I think, the exposure first thing in the morning is going to be great.
Yeah. And then anything to keep your body healthy from future occurrences. That one does tend to have some more sun exposure linkages. So again, that prolonged sun exposure, if you're going to be in the sun for a longer period of time, just protective clothing. Otherwise, keeping your body very healthy in general. So eating a balanced diet, taking care of your emotions, and taking care of your general energy. So that would be things like grounding, walking outside.
How about vitamin D? Don't you think that at that point, we really want to focus on, if we're not able to get as much sunshine, is make sure you're taking a vitamin
to
D3,
supplement with vitamin D3, K2. Is great. And then there was a second part to the question about. So one thing my providers don't have knowledge on is whether HRT or hormone replacement therapy impacts skin cancer. I am currently on progesterone and recently started an estradiol patch. I'm a 46-year-old female. The doctor treating the cancer said I don't have to modify any medications. Are there any considerations related to skin cancers and hormone therapy? So most often skin cancers, especially superficially, meaning like the outside skin, don't tend to have a ton of linkages to hormone receptors. However, it would be important, to complete. Usually they do biopsies and they will test samples to see if they are. If your doctors are suggesting that there isn't any impact on them, I would tend to agree. And generally speaking, hormones can be very healthy in that perimenopause, menopausal stage. Things like estrogen are very protective overall in our body. In fact, we tend to see a lot of diseases go up for women after estrogen is no longer in our system. So there just tends to be a lot of protective benefit in general with estrogens.
Yeah, I would think so too. Especially after menopause, right?
100%, right?
Yes.
So diabetes, heart disease, bone density, all gets worse. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, what are your thoughts about intermittent fasting? Who can it benefit, and what is the best way to do? What's the best way to do it? Okay,
that's all you.
Yeah. Okay. So I think men, do really good, better on intermittent fasting than women do. But I say if a woman's going to do it, I like to do the part of what we'll call restricted eating time. So, for example, we know we have the most digestive fire about 10 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So my intention is to have you do an early dinner because it's easier to digest, number one. And then you have that time, let's just say by 6 to, right around that, 9:30, 10 o'clock. And I think that's a good amount of time and better for women, and men, they can, do intermittent fasting a little bit better. But I would say for a woman, that would be the way I do it. And then of course, if you're working out, it's important to make sure that you're getting enough protein.
Yep.
So I used to do, my intermittent fasting with, some biological coffee. I added some cream to it, which was fat, so it wouldn't raise my blood sugar in any way. But then I started realizing, wait a minute, you know what? I'm not building the muscle that I should be building with the heavy weights I'm doing. So then I just started adding that, scoop of protein powder, the prime protein, which I love because it's got 2 ingredients in it, into my coffee. And then that way, I had that protein, and then I didn't have any carbohydrates, so we're still in the idea of keeping it very low in the glucose mindset, but giving your body those amino acids that you need. So I prefer that women do it, do evening, longer period of time into the morning. I think that's really quite good.
Correct. Yeah. And it helps reduce cortisol levels overall for women as well. Men don't tend to have as much of a spike in the morning as women do. Right. So we do tend to see that.
Get out of bed, get going.
We do tend to see that it helps on that regard too. Yeah. So hormonal regulation. So intermittent fasting for women is more the later half of the day. Yeah. You also tend to get better sleep. So the longer you are away from metabolizing food, you tend to have better sleep quality. So there tends to be a lot of benefits from intermittent fasting in a reverse, right, from what men tend to do. Yes. And even for men and for women, protein consumption near working out is very important.
Yeah, it's super important. So, and also too, we Dr. Kinley likes to recommend even fasting sometime, right? And so again, with short periods of time, it's really good. It gives the whole digestive system a break. It gets the immune system not to have to deal with, a lot of other things that it was having to metabolize and work on as far as your metabolism. So Dr. Kinley does sometimes, say, okay, you got a two week no food. Like, what? Right? But so that's why we do the 21-day detox, because it's a really good kind of segue into something like that. But honestly, some of our patients, they feel elated. I have a friend who does 2 weeks, just basically fasting on maybe bone broth or teas and things like that, or non-caffeinated, and she's like so high all the time, life and energy. And I'm like, I wish I could have a little of that, but after 3 days, I'm like, I want my food, right? So I think there's a place for all of that, for fasting short term, for the intermittent fasting is great. Restricted eating, I love it. I don't eat anything after dinner so that, like Ariel said, you have better sleep if you're not in the process of digesting, because it's rest and digest. So at least a minimum of 3 hours in the intake of anything before you go to sleep is always a good idea.
Absolutely.
Having cereal or banana at night before you go to bed is not a good idea.
No.
Okay. Let's see. It says, I have a friend that has been suffering from Lyme disease for 15 years. It's debilitating. Do you have protocols at the Center for New Medicine that can help?
Absolutely. So some of the bigger challenges that come with Lyme disease is what we had mentioned before, is like having good detoxification pathways. And then sometimes some of the treatments that we give for Lyme's disease causes it to, so to speak, flare, right? Yeah. So they'll have more muscle pain, joint pain, the fatigue, the brain fog, and several of the other symptoms that come along with it. And so some of it would be to kind of help working at opening those up. Some of them would be at treating the Lymes specifically. So there's many different treatments for Lymes. I would have to know exactly what's been done in the past for the Lymes, whether it's conventional or integrative or functional. So I would know the direction to go in. But it's all a factor of getting the whole person healthy so that they can kind of deal with the Lymes. So let's say, for an example, one of the treatment options that we can offer would be, we have a variety of like ozone-based therapies, which tend to do very well for Lymes. So that would be like our 10-pass ozone. Sometimes patients with Lymes may need to start at 1 pass and then work their way up to the 10. And then there's also our EBU, which allows us to filter some of the Lymes out of the body, as well as ozonate it prior to going back. And then there can even be other treatment options that exist outside of that can help to treat, get rid of, or suppress the Lymes, so they can have a more functional life, right? So they're not stuck in bed and they don't feel like, I mean, I've had some patients come in wheelchairs from their Lymes or their chronic infections, and they can leave walking.
Yeah. So. And also we do frequency testing on that as well. We have a Cowden protocol, that he's got it all set that goes through all the microorganisms, all the cofactors and stuff. So we can get a clear picture energetically, what's compromising the system. And the beautiful thing about it is a biosurvey. So there's also, a testing of what will serve the patient best in treating it. So, we use a lot of nutrimetics products for that. So we've got a variety of ways to treat it. But then again, we want to also say, when people have been dealing with this for 15 years, there's a level of frustration, there's a level of anger, there's a level of sadness, there's a level of grief. So we've got to deal with their emotions. And I think most of you would agree, if you have any kind of autoimmune issue or gut issues, that whenever you're stressed out, the flares become stronger, more apparent. So we really want to kind of get, the whole human being, in regards to creating, a better balance all the way around.
100%. Yeah. And when you've been that low, there's other factors that may be affected, like you mentioned, right? So they may not be consuming foods appropriately because they just don't feel well, right? So there's other things that'll be out of balance alongside that.
Because usually when you have something like that, you're going to have gut issues.
Of course.
So then we're dealing with, all kinds of stuff when it comes, whether it's the oxalates or whether it's the lectins or whether it's the gluten or the glyphosate. So it's just kind of like, okay, let's just kind of start with, building our foundation now, but that's usually going to be, a lot of it is going to be gut oriented as well. Okay, so let's see where are we at with this one. I'm going to just try to get this thing out of the way so we don't have to see that. There we go. All right, good. Okay, go ahead.
So it says, generally speaking, when it comes to cancer, how long will I need to continue treatments? Do I have to follow all of the recommendations? If I were to focus on the most important aspects of healing, what would they be? So when it comes to cancer, very dependent upon the type of cancer, what's already been done. Are we working alongside, say, an oncologist or another specialist who's helping to manage the cancer? But in general, with some of our treatments, so what I would tell patients is the first 3 months are going to feel very overwhelming. There's a lot, right? So we have to rebuild that foundation. So there's usually a gut healing protocol. We're helping to get rid of other chronic infections or treat other chronic infections alongside the cancer. So there's a lot that needs to be done. So the first 3 to 6 months are pretty intensive, just depending upon the stage of the cancer and what all we need to fix. In general, we're probably treating more aggressively, probably the first year. And then when we get to a point where things seem like they're starting to improve, then that pace tends to slow down a little bit more. So I would say that at a minimum, we're really going to be treating you for life. But honestly, like intense treatments, a year to 2 years, it could be longer. It just really depends on the individual. In terms of following the recommendations, yeah, absolutely. That's highly recommended that you should follow all of them. Now, if there's areas where, let's say the 21-day cleanse, most people don't want to start it if they're traveling, right? Which I understand, right? Enjoy your life, enjoy traveling, especially with the summer coming up. So I get that. So we can delay it, we can push it back, and we can say, do the 21-day cleanse when you come back. So there are different ways we can modify it, but we need to know that we need to modify. So definitely a conversation with your provider is the most important in terms of the recommendations. And then if I were to focus on the most important aspects of healing, what would they be? Oh gosh, there's just so many. So we've kind of touched on many of them already. So gut health, emotional health, energetic health. I think that's one we really haven't touched on a ton.
Yeah.
Which is like we are all kind of human batteries, and we need to have a way to recharge. So we have both assessments and treatments for us as like human batteries,
right?
Which is another integral part to making ourselves well. So I tend to see a lot of patients with chronic conditions, cancer being one of them, that tend to have lower energy overall because the body's trying to do so much for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it does become important to do those assessments and to do those treatments as well. And most of them can be even done at home.
Absolutely. Now, we'll talk a little bit about, you touched on a little bit in regards of some of the treatments that we have that could turn up the electrical current of the body.
Yeah. So the assessment would be doing need, and that kind of looks at how good are we as a human battery. And that should be normals between 20 and 25. And so we kind of do the assessment first. We see if there's anything physically that needs to be fixed. So that could be scars, that could be poor dentation. So having things like stuck in the mouth that are causing chronic problems. And so we do an evaluation. Then once we have the evaluation, we can use things like, so Scanar is one of our treatments that can be used. It's a device that can help to kind of recalibrate the nervous system, which is our main electrical current that tends to flow within the body. And that can be used to kind of help heal scars too. Mm-hmm. We can also do biocharger, which is our ability to kind of mildly recharge, right? Mm-hmm. So it kind of is like revving the engine a little bit. And then there's biocharger, or I'm sorry, there was biomodulator, and then biocharger is the Tesla coil, right? So we kind of basically recharge ourselves, but we do it using frequencies. So frequencies is something that we can use to help leverage. It's how our cells all communicate, energetically speaking, right? So they can communicate with chemicals, but they can communicate with energy too. And so it helps to reset that conversation energetically.
Yeah. And if you kind of look at your body as, I say organized particles that have a frequency and a motion and a wave, then we'd say, okay, there's other things besides these treatments, like let's just say grounding and going to the beach and laying on the sand for 20 minutes, or the grass 100%. And being in a forest and nature and love and connection. So all of these things, raise the frequency of your heart. And so your heart, I would say, healing is going to come from the place of the heart, not from, the brain and its thoughts that can take you down the rabbit hole. I always say, don't choose anything out of fear. Choose it from a place of love and trust. And so this is kind of one of the things that, I specialize in, is getting people reconnected to recognizing, who are you? All right, I'm not this physical body that that's biodegradable. I am an immortal, my mortality is secure. I am an energy frequency, and we cannot, break it. We cannot disrupt it. Well, we can disrupt frequency, but we cannot change it. It can just bend, and it can move from one dimension to another. So when you start to realize, wait a minute, I'm an electrical current, and every single organ resonates at a specific frequency. Mm-hmm. So I love sound bowl therapy. I love, the mm-hmm. whole gong and the singing bowls and all. And we were just talking about the solfegy meditations that, are high love frequency, yep. with Insight Timer. So there's so many things that you can do that don't cost you any money. You just yep. need to be mindful. So that's kind of our goal, is teach you a lifestyle, how you can, take charge. We want to be your companions on this journey. Someone said, do we have to do everything? Well, of course, you don't want your whole day to be a checklist, check, because then we get into this perfectionist mindset. And a lot of people are perfectionists. And then that in themselves is raising a lot of cortisol levels and, mm-hmm. Critical mind. Oh my God, I didn't do enough. Oh, I didn't do that. Oh, now it's going to come back, or things of that nature. We said, no, be like the greatest, kindest mother to yourself, with a level of compassion and curiosity and observing rather than judging. So, yep. Just so think of that, I'm an electrical current. I need to be like a Tesla car and plugged into to my current as much as I can. Okay. So it says, does everyone have parasites? And what did I eat that caused this?
Do you want to start that one?
Sure. I would say, yes, we all have parasites. And in fact, even some of these parasites are beneficial, right? In regards of the immune system. And so like, kind of think about it, is that, I don't know if you guys ever remember that little rhyme, the worms crawling, the worms crawling. Okay. And it's, so kind of they're there as the army to make, basically dissolve us when it's time to die to some degree. But oftentimes they're getting mixed messages. Our body's, sending out a signal because you're acidic. You've got all these mental toxicity, and the body's like, oh, it's time to decompose. And all of a sudden now you're a host for all of these wonderful parasites that are already living there. And then you don't have a very good lifestyle, your gut health, and, you don't do cleansing, you don't have good bowel function, things of that nature. And then now you start to create the perfect environment for parasites. So there's not probably any person that's walking on this planet that doesn't need to address parasites. And we give our dogs and animals parasite cleanses every 6 months. So what the heck, parasites have no borders. Just because we're not in a third world country doesn't mean we don't have it. Now you can go your whole life and never have any symptoms or be affected by it because they're not obvious. Some people have really obvious symptoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've got like crawling of the skin. They've got itching of the, all the mucous membranes and the anus and things of that nature.
Oh, sometimes they come out through their skin. Yeah.
Oh yeah. They come out through their skin. They come out through their bowels. What is this, spaghetti that looks like I just, had an elimination, So we always say good, better out than in, the bottom line. Some people get really grossed out, because we have the firefly and, it can energetically test to see, what parasites you have and bacteria and things of that nature.
Yep.
And sometimes, you may get the responses, wow, this parasite is one that just is like, oh, it's just going to keep replicating. And people get really freaked out because they think, oh my God, there's aliens inside my body. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Those are just uninvited guests that we need to create a terrain where it's not welcome.
Exactly.
And we can live symbiotically, right? There's many species in the ocean and they should all be able to live together, but we need a balance, and that gut's going to make a huge difference, and your immune system is going to make a huge difference, and your mind is going to make a huge difference. But I think everybody has parasites, so I think everybody should do at least twice a year a little bit parasite cleanse.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's even other cultures outside of the United States that do it routinely. Like every 6 months, once a year. Like it's culturally acceptable to kind of do that in natural ways, right? So anything from like papaya seeds or things of that nature.
Pumpkin seeds,
they'll consume,
also too,
right?
The grandma old-fashioned way of giving you a tablespoon of castor oil.
Exactly,
Okay.
right? So all of those, those treatments that have honestly been around, right, for a long, long time, that is used outside of the United States. We just tend to think like, oh, what we're eating or we're consuming is so clean,
so hygienic.
But it's really not. I mean, there's many different ways that this can get in if you have pets, if you're eating certain types of foods.
Even walking barefoot.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
And even your food that's organic. That's why for me, I wash everything in, a grapeseed extract. Just 10 drops in a big bowl. And, I even my meat, I put it in there for a second or two because, everything's going to have some exposure. So, if you've got a good digestive system with a good hydrochloric acid, which most people don't because they're so stressed out, they don't have that basic, strong HCl, hydrochloric acid, that can break things down. So then now it leaves you more susceptible to have these wonderful uninvited guests in your home. So yeah, I'd say yes. And I think that everybody should be doing something about parasite cleansing at least once a year for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. It says, what is the best type of exercise after menopause? Well, since I'm the menopause here and you're not, I would say weight training is essential. 100%. Okay, but again, you want to think in incrementally getting stronger by adding more workload, because if we're just that's not going to do anything. And a lot of people focus on their arms and the large muscle groups like your glutes and your quads are larger muscles. They're going to take more energy, and so the stronger they are, the more your body burns fat for fuel. So I like doing weights training. So 3 days a week, I'll do weights training. But I used to just kind of be in the regular, and then my sister moved in with me, and she's like, oh, well, let's get down there where the guys are at, and I'm like, oh, but my back, or I'm all right. But then I started to go, wait a minute, I'm feeling so strong. And so, whether we're doing, the kettlebell or we're doing lunges across the floor, and I'm sweating, I'm like, oh, I love it, I hate it, but I feel so good and I feel so much stronger, right?
Yeah.
So I think that weights training is essential.
Yeah.
I think that, creatine at our age for memory and for muscle is really good. So after I go
so
to go work out, I come home and I take my powdered creatine, and then that just kind of helps in regards of your energy and also building that lean muscle tissue. I think that HIIT training is essential too. So HIIT training is just basically 30 minutes, kind of as fast as you can go, and 90 seconds a little slower you can go. So I do it on the bike, right? Yeah. And so there's, at my gym, we've got kind of like those Peloton kind of things, right? Mm-hmm. And stand up and then and then stand up. So I just save 12 to 15 minutes. You don't need a full hour or anything like that. So for me, I'm in and out of the gym 30 to 45 minutes, but I'm consistent. I think consistency is the main thing. And then 100%. Of course, at least 2 days a week, if not more, but pretty much 2 days for weekend or Friday. I'm always doing a hike to get out in nature, to connect, to just see the beautiful landscape that God has provided us, and chit chat and things like that. So I love community. Yeah. So I love nature several days a week. I think weight training is essential. I think HIIT training is great. And then of course, if you have time, you can fit in your yoga and just do, kind of metabolic confusion. Don't do the same thing all the time. I think that was the other thing I was going to say is don't always do the same exercises over and over, which is kind of what you were alluding to, is making sure that we're changing it up every few months usually, if not every day. Yeah. Right. So every other day I'm kind of doing this and that, and then I'm now working on abs, and now I'm working on butt. But even the same arm exercises too, right? Eventually your muscles learn to overcome that, right? And so it's no longer the same level of efficacy. So it's you have to change up the type of arm exercise that you're doing. Absolutely. And that type of deal. Yeah, your body's really good at learning how to conserve its energy. So it really is. Okay, we know she's going to burn 100 calories, or that's all we're going to burn. So you got to, you have that metabolic confusion and throw something else on them. It's wait, all right. So I think that that's important. Okay, does everyone have to follow a specific diet when they have cancer? Well, it's a really good question. I'd say no. Okay, the bottom line is you're an individual, so it depends on the state that you come here. If you've lost 50 pounds and you're in a state of cachexia where you have no muscle, we're not going to put you on such a reduction diet mindset, because then we might kill the cancer, but in the process you won't have enough energy to survive. So, and then somebody might be a vegetarian and is refusing to eat meat, and so really it depends on the patient and what they what the doctor feels is most important. I will present that, but I don't try to force anybody into doing something that they don't want to do. If they've been vegetarian their whole life and they don't want to kill because of animals and spiritual, I don't tell them to do that. I say, okay, how can we best look at food as medicine, and then from that point making sure you're getting an adequate amount of protein, because when your body is under stress, it's going to break down your lean muscle tissue because it's the easiest access in terms of energy. So we want to make sure we're getting an adequate amount of protein. A lot of patients will be kind of I got to go vegetarian because I have breast cancer, and then that sometimes doesn't last for very long. You're right, it doesn't. It's hard to commit to. Yeah, they go out to dinner, all they can have is what they can't have, your pastas and your rices and things of that nature. So we have to just have the mindset of lowering the glucose. That is the platform, and making sure that we're taking out all of the foods that just don't serve as a food, whether they're the seed oils or whether they're processed food or whether they're fast foods, things of that nature. I mean, granted, nobody's going to be perfect. You bless it, you eat it, and you move on to the next. Right. But the bottom line is to create a new lifestyle that's not going to just benefit you through your journey, but it's going to benefit you for your longevity and also for your family. Because so many patients go, wow, I've completely shifted, but I'm so happy because now my children who are 5 and 6 years old are going to have the benefit that I never had, because my mom worked all the time and all we ate was fast food. I had no idea. I didn't really eat vegetables. So I'm now being able to what I've learned, pass it over and create a better foundation and safety for my own children. So again, not everybody needs a ketosis diet. I mean, unless you have pancreatic cancer, glioblastoma, or some lymphomas, I don't put people on a severe ketogenic diet. And if we do, because it's medically prescribed, we just do it for a short period of time. Right. Really being careful and making sure that they're not losing too much weight. But really trying to always have the protein here, the carbohydrates here, and then the fats up here. So when you're in good health, then we can do, equal protein to equal carbohydrates, and then we drop the fat down a little bit. But until that, I always say protein should be here and the carbohydrates should be down here. And then of course, the more organic in nature, the more actually alive you can eat. But raw foods is not always the goal to do here, because your body has a hard time digesting that, right? Especially when you're in a compromised situation. So cooked foods, cooked vegetables and things like that, just don't overboil them or anything like that. But again, I always say, have some raw for the chlorophyll and things of that nature, but then also have the cooked vegetables alongside of it, and then whatever protein you're choosing to put onto your plate, and then good healthy fats is where I like to go. And I don't do too much fruit, a little minimal.
Right. No, 100% agree. And I think in general, not just cancer, like there should be a better diet in general that we're following.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we like? We're like the 47th healthiest in the world. I mean, that's pretty bad. I mean,
the sad diet, the standard American diet. Yeah.
We've missed the mark any way you put at it. But,
oh my gosh, so
it's
much.
a consumer, right? You got all the fast food, all the processed food right at the counter when you're getting ready to check out, chips and your Pringles and and of course your emotions are going to drive your desire for food. And you're stressed out. Sure, those chips look really good.
The kids have been annoying you the whole time in the grocery store. Gosh, I really want that Snickers bar.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. Okay. So why is it important to do emotional work if you feel like you're already fine and have not had trauma in your life? I get this question a lot.
We just talked about it yesterday.
Well, so Ariel had mentioned, she said, well, if you're sitting here with a disorder that we may call a dis-ease, then there is, absence of emotional health. And so we'd say, wouldn't you agree that like 95% of all diseases are stress related? And then trapped emotions that we just don't express because, you're taught as a child to be seen and not heard. And so a lot of people just shove their emotions down because they don't want conflict, right?
100%.
And so, the framework of the foundation that we do, Dr. Killian says everyone that comes here that's dealing with a terminal and or serious situation has got to do EVOX because we have to really look at the why. People who are healthy and so forth, we want to inspire them to do it because everybody who's in a human body has experienced trauma. And I tell patients, trauma is just not the bad things that happen, it's the good things that should have happened. And I said, everybody's had trauma. You can just tell me how wonderful your parents and they were so blah, blah, blah. And I said, but most of your trauma is pre-verbal. Yeah, you're in the crib and they're trying to teach you how to sleep all night and they're not coming to your aid and you're crying all night long. Well, what does that tell the child? I am abandoned, and so again, a lot of it is pre-verbal. So, and we have generational trauma that's passed over from one generation to another.
Oh, yes.
And this is what
that embeds in our DNA.
Oh, embeds in our DNA. And I would find it so fascinating because when I do the EVOX, that's what it's going to show. It's going to show generational pattern of what has been imprinted on a cellular level. I mean, even in the Bible, it says that you're going to pay for the sins of your forefathers for 4 generations.
And this is the oldest version of medicine is believing that emotions trapped in the body is what causes problems, right? So, I mean, it's been believed for thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
Exactly. So even people who have done a lot of therapy work, and they've reconciled, I forgave my mother, I forget. And I said, but that's really great on a conscious adult point of view, but how about the child?
Yeah.
Because who's running your system right now with the 95% programming is the child. And the child wanted a hug. The child wanted to be protected. The child wanted to be told that they were beautiful. I mean, I have some patients that can't even remember being hugged or being told they were beautiful or anything. And so again, verbal trauma, physical trauma, there's big T, small t, but we've all experienced that. And like people will, say, oh, we had a great, childhood, this and that, and then later I find out that their dad was an alcoholic or their mother, they had an affair. Well, that's all trauma. They had a divorce. Right. That's trauma, And so, they just don't look at it. They think trauma is like, sexual abuse or being beaten or not being fed. Those are big T traumas, death, things of that nature. But how about all the little T's, which are just like little cuts, right? And of course, we get triggered. I always say, I welcome triggers because that just means that I've just discovered a wound that has not yet been healed.
Right. That's an emotion I need to meet and figure
exactly.
out why.
Killing the
where is it coming from?
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I tell patients, it's just, you want to look at it from a perspective of what needs healing. And now I'm not influenced by my childhood environment, but I've dragged that because I had to survive emotionally, and I've dragged it into my adulthood. And I say, okay, now you need to be the mother to yourself. You know what you would have wanted more of that was the good stuff that we're seeking in our relationship, and you know what you didn't want in your relationships that was not so good, which oftentimes all relationships, especially marriages, especially long-term marriages, you're going to go through all that because it's about healing the inner child within yourself. Yeah. So when people succeed and they say, I've had 40 years of marriage, but it hasn't been easy, I said, but you've created victory over why you're here in this lifetime because you were able to navigate those situations and, still maintain a relationship that's solid.
Yeah.
We had one question, if it was safe to wash your veggies with diluted hydrogen peroxide, and what dilution, and does it get rid of pesticides?
So I think for pesticides, most research probably would support the use of baking soda in water.
Yeah.
So usually about a couple tablespoons of baking soda in 5 to 6 cups of water for 10 minutes kills about 90 or gets rid of 90% of pesticides. So there's some pretty clear data suggesting of that, pretty cheap and inexpensive. Hydrogen peroxide, so possibly, but you're only going to be targeting specific ones.
Yeah.
It doesn't target all of them.
I would use the baking soda.
I think baking soda is way better.
Yeah, I think so too. How much time do we have? One more. We have one more. Okay, we have just one more question. So it says, when is the best time to start hormones and when do I need to use them? Can you discuss the main benefits and risk of HRT? So I'll hand that one over to you.
So there's a lot in there, right? So hormones can definitely mean a whole slew of conditions. So that can be, we can be looking at men or women. We can be looking at thyroid hormones, which can also be thrown off as well throughout life for a variety of reasons. I think for the most part, HRT, we're thinking like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone type medications, right? So there can be imbalances in young children, right? So I've definitely had my fair share of like 17, 18-year-old kids who are having hormonal imbalances, but it's about getting to their root cause and whether they need hormones to correct it or whether there's other treatments that we can do.
Detoxification.
Exactly. So it's usually there's something else overwhelming their system or overwhelming their liver, which your liver does like 500 different things inside your body. So like one of my top things is like, you always got to make sure you like love your liver and take care of your liver, and because it does so much for you. So it kind of getting to like why we're seeing that. If we're getting to an age where 30s, 40s, 50s, where there's that normal fluctuation in hormones, for men, you know, it's a little bit different. For women, there is a finite time in which we stop making hormones for the most part, right? So we can still make a little testosterone, but not much. Right. But for the most part, progesterone and estrogen have a finite date for us. So with that said, if we're seeing there's an issue, we can start certain hormones pretty much at any point in time. Like progesterone is generally considered fairly innocuous, and helps to support things like the rest and digest, the sleep, the cortisol levels.
Especially when you're under a lot of stress.
100%. So, and for women who are still having cycles, we may just give it in the second half of the cycle when your progesterone would naturally be higher anyways after you've ovulated. In regards to, say, someone in the perimenopause state, you know, it depends on a number of factors, but when we're seeing symptoms, so things like hot flashes, night sweats, increased irritability, difficulty tolerating like heat or cold, then we start to say there might be a need to incorporate more hormones beyond progesterone. Women need estrogen and testosterone in order to feel well too. So that can help with some of the other symptoms like weight gain, sleep dysregulation issues, right? So those are very vital and key there. For men, we also tend to see symptoms of lower hormones. So that would be things like fatigue, they're having weight gain, libido changes or erection changes. Those can also be linked to lower testosterone levels. We can see focus and attention span, sleep issues, very similar, right? For men, higher cortisol levels can tend to influence testosterone as well. And so there's a variety of ways you can receive hormone replacement therapy. It's important to discuss them with your provider and to make sure it's a good fit for your lifestyle and for the symptoms that you're experiencing at that time.
And natural, right?
I prefer bioidentical. Yeah. So that is my preference because there tends to be fewer risk factors associated with that. And I usually am more of the mindset of like minimum amount needed or necessary to get you the results that you're looking for and to kind of maintain from there.
You know, and I just might add to that, like say, for example, young women, oftentimes, or even women who are trying to get pregnant and have miscarriage, a lot of times are very low in progesterone. And so they may need to just to hold on to that, you know, fetus progesterone for the first 3 months of their pregnancy, just to try to ensure that the baby attaches itself, right?
Yep.
And then also too, like, let's just say, for example, when I went through menopause, I had no symptoms. I didn't have hot flashes. I didn't get tired, things of that nature. But we had a Tibetan doctor that was working here, and he didn't speak very good English. And every time I'd walk by him, he'd say something like, "Get in, help!" And I'd like, so finally I stopped and I said, "What did you say?" And he goes, "You need hormones." And I said, "I need hormones?" And I'm like, okay, well, so I got my blood test. I did a testing, and it was interesting because 2 years prior to me not having a period anymore, I had 35-year-old bones. Okay, no problem. Well, 2 years later in menopause, I had osteopenia, right? So it's important for bone health, even though that you do not have any symptoms whatsoever.
Yep.
although the sleep thing, I definitely
Yeah.
want to take it down. Okay,
That's
sleep
like-
thing. But so again, if you want to preserve, your muscles, especially, a lot of the crepey skin, lack of testosterone,
Yes.
PCOS, things
Even
of that
collagen
nature.
production.
Yeah.
Yep.
So again, I think that's something that needs to be addressed on an individual level with your provider.
100%. Yep.
Will you just pull up the last slide with our contact info?
Okay. Yep. Right there. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this segment. We are having a lot of fun here, and it's nice to have Ariel here. It's nice to have these young minds with so much passion. It's like, oh my God, I'm just going to just sit next to her. Maybe it'll vibe over to me.
Osmosis, right?
Osmosis. But anyway, if you find any of this interesting and you'd like to know more information, please contact us. You have our information there. We'd love to support you in any way we possibly can. And thank you guys all, and join us for our next episode in a couple of weeks, I guess, right? Okay, goodbye.
Thanks.